Hi, and welcome to the Ada K Show. I am Ada K. Brown, and am currently a criminal justice major, and I'm a deaf courtroom commentator. Grab a cup of Java, and let's dive in. Good. I hope everybody had a good lunch. I went and got my tags dealt with on my car, did my son's tag, went through and grabbed lunch, and they gave me a long lunch. Well, at least I didn't get a ticket for not having tags. It's hard when you're working before the office opens and you're working after it closes. So, anywho, we are back for the afternoon hearing or motion or closing arguments of the Monica Sementilli trial. God help us. And the court is still on lunch, as you can see. So we are going to get the music off. There you go. I have been prepping my binders. Hello, Elena. Welcome back, Toxic. Welcome back, June. Oh, gained one, lost one. The total number seated is still 10. So Monday we will not be in court. They will be doing their jury selection on Monday. Well, that happens. You win some, you lose some. What can I say? Hey. So we also have iSub. If you are new to this channel and you subbed, please put iSub. Gives you extra entries into the drawing at the end of the month. I'm excited. I'm getting my binder done. I am going through and highlighting the names that have already testified in the first trial, and I'm putting who they are underneath their names. I got about 125 more to go of that, but I got it organized, and I'm ready to rock and roll for Karen Reed. I am trying to figure out how to do the bingo. So I'm going to work on that this afternoon, this weekend. So I'm going to work on that this weekend, see if I can do the bingo thing. And that will be awesome for us to have bingo we can play. Oh, you are a loyal follower, and thank you so much, Elena. I really do appreciate it. Toxic, do I still put type of information in the or on the new place of Discord? That's going to be her decision. Stream pins for mods. What is it? Ada working Discord management. Member resources, ASL trial, member corner. Members information drop, please. Members information drop would be a good place because I can see it too. But thank you for giving that to us. We have time to talk about it right now. The Monica Sementilli trial. If I was a juror, I would be so over it already. I would be like, Your Honor, there's going to be a medical condition that launches in about 30 minutes into this closing arguments on this afternoon with this woman. If you do not get this woman to hurry up and close her arguments, there will be a medical event. And that medical event may involve me jumping over the bar and attacking said woman. No, I'm kidding. We wouldn't do that. But I may get up and stomp my feet and scream hysterically. Yeah, we don't need a second trial. And that's what's so frustrating. We are having a second trial. This is the third trial. In all honesty, if you really want to go there, this is trial number 3. Because the first trial was the opening. The second trial was the cases in chiefs that were put up. And the third trial is the closing. I'm just saying, y'all, this is getting to be a little bit much. No, it's okay. You're good. Thank you very much. Also, June, you can always private message me if you think it's something urgent. Like if the president gets shot again or something crazy. Boom, boom. There we go. I'm just getting everything lined up. You're awesome, June, and we do appreciate your work so very much. You're amazing. We have some amazing people on our team, and I have gotten a little slack. I always ask my mods to send me a photo of them. So all mods, if you're listening, mods, send me a photo of you. Please. Please send a photo of you. We do have our new evidence. We have our new evidence PD collection kit. We have that. And we are ready to start the Karen Reed trial. I should be putting this up more often. We have the BS meter. Oh, I like that BS meter. Although you can't quite tell what it is on this court. Maybe I ought to try and make that bigger. We have the ILY. And we have the in my humble opinion. Of course, we have the A to K and the AKB. So we're just going to leave that one up for now. It kind of matches. We are waiting. Hello. No comment, June. No comment. Hi, Missy Morales. Welcome aboard. Welcome back. Welcome back. Da, 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 da. I don't know. I don't remember it. I know I'm crazy. I know. Back, please. Tell me. She's actually finished her closing before lunch. Oh, precious dear. You hope way too much. Not even a chance. She's coming back after lunch. Welcome back, Karate Cat Mom. Yes, we do have issues with this woman. Oh. I don't know, guys. Nope. She's got her third wind, sadly. Did you see where she was actually struggling? I was celebrating the struggle. Oh, this I'd say would be her fourth wind. I would call it her fourth wind. Definitely would call it the fourth wind. Oh, the no-bake pineapple cream cheese balls disappear every time. Ooh, pineapple cheese balls? Mmm. I don't know.
Good afternoon.
Oh!
And Ms. Sorvin, you may continue.
No!
Welcome back. we're stopping at 3, I believe, today. Yeah. My voice is starting to go. Oh, thank you. So when we left off before lunch, we had just finished talking about the dates between January 11th and January 13th. Now I want to move on to January 22nd, which I've covered already in some detail. So I'm going to not spend, again, a lot of time going through it again, but you remember
I don't
these
believe
photos. This is
Who believes
the
it?
pho restaurant
Who believes
that
it's
was
not going to spend
located
5 hours on it?
off of Ventura Boulevard. And
Gotta make
what you
somebody
heard
walk around here.
was, and I mentioned yesterday and today that Mr. Austin was the first person to bring up the attempted hit on Fabio during his proffer on November 18th. And as you also know, that was despite the fact that Mr. Baker had already been interviewed numerous times and never brought up. And so the first time we heard about that was from Mr. Austin. Now, as you know, after Mr. Austin brought up this attempted hit on January 22nd and started describing
Can I attempt
the
to hit you?
location, we went back between, you heard there were 2 dates for this proffer, and the 18th and the 20th. And between those 2 dates, we went back, we looked up opened up the defendant's cell extraction, Fabio's cell phone extractions for the January 22nd date. And we saw that the defendant had Googled a pho restaurant or a pho restaurant. And so we looked up the location of that pho restaurant that she had Googled on a computer. And
Okay, guys, the way she talks, sometimes it's hard for me to read as fast. So I have my big captioning over here. If you see me looking off screen, I'm reading her.
when we did so, it
Absolutely.
matched
Big.
the description that we had obtained from Austin during his proffer session on November 18th with respect to the pillars, the UPS store, the nail shop. He described it as a Chinese restaurant. And so it also had the parking lot behind, and that was Exhibit 249. And so when Austin came back, the detectives brought him out from jail a couple days later so we could continue. We presented the photos here to Mr. Austin, who then recognized the location, identified it as the same location that he went to with Baker in order to kill Fabio. And if you look at the photograph on the right, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see there's some red circle around a location where a car is parked in the lot. And that was his writing, where he identified the location where Fabio Sementilli had parked his Ford F-150 on the night of January 22nd. So then, of course, after that, we pulled additional photos. We were able to see that there was a parking area behind the strip mall, just as Mr. Austin had described. And we called Cy to have him go back and look at Baker's and the defendant's and Fabio's cell phone data in terms of the cell data, the CDRs, call detail records that you've learned so much about, and the cell tower information for those particular devices. And then you heard the results when Cy flew in to testify regarding his analysis of the times and the sequences, which corroborated what Austin told us and connected the defendant to the attempted murder to kill Fabio. Now, as you also heard, and I mentioned,
Thank you for
there were approximately 180 Viber messages between the defendant and Baker on January 22nd, and there's a timeline exhibit of that. That's Exhibit 159. What Cy testified to was that the defendant, who was in the area of his apartment at about 3 p.m., gets a call from the defendant. She calls him, just like we talked about what precipitated the meet in Vegas. They speak for a little bit over 2 minutes, and then he leaves his apartment with Austin and drives to the strip mall. And along the way, he stopped Mr. Baker at a Chase ATM that was next to a Vons, that Austin also recalled there being a supermarket, and about 1.8 miles, it was testified to, a little less than 2 miles from the strip mall, is this Chase ATM, where you were also supplied with the records that showed a withdrawal, and the photos next to a Vons. And so that Chase ATM next to the Vons is about 1.8 miles, less than 2 miles from this pho restaurant. And then, of course, you heard Cyree testify that the cellular records show that Baker's phone
You're so
stagnates
amazing.
from
Aw, thank you,
3:24 while
Mija.
he's waiting in the area of the strip mall for approximately 2.5 hours prior to Fabio's arrival. Again, evidence of lying in wait, as we talked about, that also occurred on
I
the
can't believe they're
following
not bleeding.
date of
Just saying.
January 23rd. And we know during the time that Baker is waiting at this location for Fabio to arrive, that there are 69 Viber messages that are going back and forth between the defendant and Baker. At 5:11, Fabio searches phone near me, obviously in response to the defendant having a conversation with him that Sunday about picking up food from a pho restaurant. And then he sends that phone near me search to his wife, the defendant, via instant message. The defendant then specifically Googles pho California between 5:12 and 5:47 on January 22nd, and comes up with that same address of the location of California of 19548 Ventura Boulevard that Fabio then goes to about 3 hours later. And of course, as I talked about the other day, there are numerous, as you can imagine, Vietnamese or pho restaurants in the San Fernando Valley. But between Baker and the defendant, they were able to pick the one pho restaurant out of all of those that Fabio went to later that night. And then we know, as I mentioned earlier, at 5:13, the defendant searches that same location, 19548, and then she deletes that search, her web history, as you heard from Detective Farrell. And so she deletes the web searches, which, as I mentioned earlier, to delete any data that would tie her to this, what's supposed to go down, a murder that night, just like she does in the Ralphs the following day. And you have the record from her phone for January 22nd, which is Exhibit 259. There's a column on the far right side. At the top, it says deleted. And then in red, you'll see it says yes for all of the things that she did on her phone on January 22nd relating to the Google searches, the address, and the California location. So she deletes all of that in anticipation of the fact that he's going to be murdered that night and that there will be a subsequent investigation. She also deletes all the messages between herself and her husband relating to Pho near me and Pho California, as well as the message that she sends to her daughter asking her if she wants fried rice. So again, destruction of evidence, and what would be the reason for destroying that evidence, unless, of course, she believed that night that Fabio was going to be murdered, and she is deleting any evidence associated with that in order to distance herself from that crime. Now, what you see here, if you recall, was a mapping that was done by Cyree with respect to the cellular data. What you see here in green that's highlighted, that's Fabio's location. And what you see here in red that's been highlighted is Baker's location. So you can see they lap over and wind up in the same location, which is the 19548 Ventura Boulevard address where the Fuck California is. And Fabio gets to that location at 6 p.m. We know from the cell phone data that Baker is still in the area now. And after that, you heard that Austin saw Fabio picking up food from that Pho California restaurant, which he then described to us as a Chinese restaurant. And that's Exhibit 249. As you also heard, even though he flew out to the location of California in order to commit this murder with Baker, that night when he is sent from the back parking lot behind the shopping center, and he goes through this alleyway that you can see where the L shape and then the perpendicular building are separated. There's a walkway there, and when he goes through and he sees Fabio, he gets cold feet. He realizes he can't go through with it, and he goes back to Baker, who's still waiting in that back parking lot, and tells Baker that he's unable to carry out the crime. And then at that point, Baker says that he's going to have further conversations with the defendant, and that Austin shouldn't worry about it. And so then Baker and Austin go back to Baker's apartment. Now, let's go to the day of the murder, January 23rd. We know the first communication that morning is from the defendant to Baker, starting at 6:50 in the morning. We know that they are in constant contact throughout that day via Viber. We know these are stills from the PowerPoint timeline that we showed you from Ed Kozin, and you'll have that available, as well as some of the still photos. And we know that that morning at 7:28, Isabella leaves for school. And so Fabio, the defendant, and Jessica are home. We know around 8 o'clock, Delia Rivera comes to clean the house. And the defendant and Baker continue to contact each other throughout the morning through Viber, text messages, as well as phone calls. And as I mentioned earlier, the cell data records also show that the defendant calls Baker later that morning, but it goes directly to voicemail. And this is during the time that the cell data shows that Baker is at the Enterprise location at about 11:01 in the morning, getting that rental vehicle, because as he claimed, his vehicles weren't working. And so he gets a one-day rental car through his friend Paula, the Nissan Versa, the silver vehicle you see here. And then we know at 11:42 that morning, the defendant and Jessica go to LA Fitness, where you can see at 11:49, the defendant enters as Jessica Parks. And 10 minutes later, Baker comes in again wearing that black sweatsuit that we talked about during the trial with the white stripes down the side. Fabio texts his wife saying that he just got home, and we saw his car leaving and returning that day, trying to get the power washer still fixed. And then, of course, we saw on video on the left, Baker is leaving. So he comes in at 11:59, and at 12:43, less than an hour, he's leaving the location. And just 13 seconds later, we see the defendant followed by her daughter leaving the LA Fitness location. And of course, we don't see anything unusual with respect to Baker with regard to any kind of an injury he's nursing. We don't see the defendant carrying anything in her hand that would potentially drip blood through the house.
Good point.
And of course, as I talked about earlier, Jessica testified there weren't any injuries that took place at the gym that day. She doesn't remember her mom bringing home any items that were bloody, such as a bloody towel. And then the defendant messages back to Fabio saying, we're on our way home. So at 1 o'clock, the defendant and Jessica return to the residence, and now they are back with Fabio and Delia, who's still there. And once again, the defendant is still communicating with Baker while she's at home. We know that between 1:20 that afternoon and 2:43, there are 30 Viber messages between them where they are putting into place their plan to kill Fabio that day. And again, in order to ensure that there will be a sufficient time for this murder to take place, the defendant texts Isabella telling her to contact her after the interview when she's heading home so that she can keep track of her whereabouts, which is critical. And that happens, as you can see here, at 1:40, and Isabella responds at 1:53. Now, this is what I talked about this morning with respect to the safe. If you look at the photo on the left, you can see this large mirror that's behind the door in the master bedroom from the walk-in closet. When you open the mirror, you can see that behind the mirror, there's a wall safe, a small wall safe. And the mirror itself has a sensor on it, which is what I was talking about today. This is, as I told you, at 2:03 at the time that she gets the message, and you can see a cutout from the records, the digital life mobility records from AT&T, that the closet mirror has been opened at 2:03. And again, this is when the defendant is at the home. And so this is when she removes the gold coins from the safe, because she knows those are objects that she's going to claim were taken during the course of this burglary or robbery and murder. And again, just like was the case with that DVR, that new DVR that was on top of the cabinet, Delia has no idea when she's asked that there even is a safe. This would be something, once again, that someone would have to tell you about for you to know. And if you remember, when Baker was on the stand, when I asked about a safe, he said that he knew that there was a safe in the house and that it was in the master bedroom, and that it was hidden, if you recall. He would have to have received that information, obviously, from the defendant, because once again, it's hidden and not in plain sight. Now, something that came about during the trial that was also interesting, another little piece. If you remember when Morella Sementilli testified that after the murder that Wednesday, which would have been January 25th, she and Fabio's side of the family fly in from Canada to California. And when they arrive, the defendant goes through what happened on the day of January 23rd. And the defendant tells them that the killers broke open the safe and broke it somehow, which obviously is a very different story than what the evidence itself showed, the physical evidence, and you can see the photographs here, as well as the fact that she gave a very different story to law enforcement, which is why she didn't want anybody from the family communicating with law enforcement, because, again, it's very hard to keep track of so many lives. We know that Delia gets picked up 2:15 after she finishes cleaning, and at this point, Fabio's home alone with Jessica and the defendant. And once again, between 2:48 and 3:13, the defendant and Baker continue to Viber as Baker is on his way to the target. And we know that he waits there for the defendant to arrive. Here at 3 o'clock, we see Baker backs the rental car into the spot close to the store. He then enters the store at 3:02, and while he's inside of the store between 3:10 and 3:19, there are more vibers, this time from Baker to the defendant while he's inside of the store. Again, the next thing that we have in this timeline is the defendant is sending a reminder to her daughter, Isabella, who she knows is having this interview, telling her good luck so that she'll remember to contact her when she's on her way home. And this is her way of keeping track of where Isabella is. We see Baker. He's coming out of the Target at 3:19. 19 minutes after entering, he's carrying a bag in his right hand. He's got his phone in his left hand. Once again, we don't see any evidence of the fact that he's injured in any manner. And we know that what he does once he goes to his vehicle, he moves it to the back of the parking lot at 3:24, away from where the security cameras are. Again, not coincidentally, and he waits to meet up with the defendant. He does that at 3:24. At 3:26, 2 minutes later, here's the defendant leaving the home in the Ford F-150 to meet up with Baker at the Target. And then the Target surveillance cameras pick up the defendant in the Ford F-150 driving down from Ventura Boulevard, turning into the parking lot. And then you can see in the purple circle the shadow of a figure. The defendant pulls up to that location there on the corner, which was a Payless store. And you can see a figure come around the front of the car, appears to come to the right front passenger side. And then when the defendant drives from that location where she stopped in the Ford F-150, that figure is no longer there, as Detective Gable described. So then it
Okay, I need to let y'all know. I just got a phone call that my dog's ashes are in. And unfortunately, their hours are going to be closed before we get done. I need to hear from you, Toxic and Haley. Is it okay if I go and pick them up? Otherwise, it's going to be next week. And then we are in trial at 7 in the morning till whatever, and I won't be able to get there during the day. Would y'all be offended if I monitor the live and go pick up my dog's ashes?
at 3:56, the defendant then reparks the vehicle. So in between this time where she pulls in, the figure comes around to the front of the vehicle, to the right front passenger. The defendant parks the Ford F-150 towards the rear of the lot, where she sits for several minutes. It's actually 4 minutes. And then again, at that point in time, she, again, just like Baker did, moves her car to the front of the lot at 3:35.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and go. How much you want to bet? What's the bet? She'll still be going when I come back. It should only take about 30 minutes. Yes, she is. But I'm just gonna let it go. What, Diane?
To hear herself talk. And then when she gets home, she pats herself on the back on what a good job she has done. She's in for a runoff with the Senate man who did a 25-hour-long filibuster.
Oh, hell no. Okay. I will be monitoring from the phone. If I have to hop in, I can. But we're just going to let this roll until I get back. I appreciate y'all's understanding. Thank you. Diane, I'll see you on the flip side. I'll let you mute yourself.
Thank you.
Go ahead and mute yourself.
At this point, goes to his car in the back of the lot. And we notice that during that time period that we just talked about, when she pulls into the lot until when she reparks, when Baker had just previously gotten out and gone to his vehicle, so it'd be 3:30 to 3:35, during that same time period, there's a gap. There are no Viber communications between them because, of course, they're together in the parking lot. And this is the point in time where the defendant likely hands off the gold coins to Robert Baker that she is going to later claim have been stolen during the course of this murder. So again, this is a very well planned out, very premeditated, very deliberate murder conspiracy that you see here. You can see here at the back, the defendant's vehicle is circled in red where she reparks towards the front of the lot before entering the target. The green at the back is Baker's vehicle where he is exiting the lot at 3:36. He's on his way to go pick up Austin and commit the murder. And the next Viber communication is from Baker as he leaves the target lot. He messages the defendant. At that point in time, at 3:37, the defendant, before she enters target, she messages, she actually calls Jessica at 3:37, but Jessica doesn't answer. So here we are at 3:38, where she enters the Target store in order to create an alibi. And as I said, at 3:37, she calls Jessica. Jessica doesn't answer. And so as a result, because she has to get a hold of her, she texts Jessica to get her out of the house. Don't be late for babysitting. That's at 3:40, 2 minutes after, to ensure that Jessica leaves because she knows Baker is soon going to be on his way over to the location. So like clockwork, after the defendant's text, Jessica leaves to babysit 7 minutes later. And so Fabio is now left home alone in the house for this brief window of time that only the defendant could possibly be aware of. This is that window of time that I talked to you about between 3:47 and 4:54. We know that the defendant accesses her surveillance cameras to ensure that everyone is gone except Fabio. At 3:53, I said it was right before 4. She logs into the IDMS Lite app to view the surveillance cameras, which was also, as you heard, unusual because the last time she did so was November 10th of 2016. So just, you'd have to believe coincidentally and out of the blue, just before Fabio is killed, she does that. Or it's completely premeditated because she's ensuring that Jessica now has left. And as you've seen before, at 4:18, Baker and Austin are caught on the surveillance video from the neighborhood where they live, jogging up to the corner of Queen Victoria toward the Sementilli residence as planned by the defendant and Baker. So also remember, there's been some testimony in this case that when Fabio's family, as I said, flew in that Wednesday on the 25th, a neighbor brings over a copy of the neighborhood surveillance video, and the family watched it while the defendant was gone. She was out doing something, and when she came back and realized that they had watched the video without her, she was angry because she wanted to be the one that watched it first. And then she proceeds to question the family as to what they were able to see on the video, whether they could see any faces, whether they could make out skin color and things of that nature. And of course, the other thing that was brought up, which is that the defendant had been engaged in a sexual affair with Robert Baker at this point for a year, but she never bothers to tell anybody that she recognizes Baker. Now, of course, obviously his face and everything is covered, but there's nothing about the way that he moved or his shape or anything that she would trigger in her brain, she claims, that would cause her to recognize Robert Baker. Then Isabella, as instructed, contacts her mother. And she testified that her mother was aware she had a job interview after school that day in Agora. And her mother told her to call on her way home, which she did at 4:22 after the interview. And Isabella testified, just as she told law enforcement during her interview, that she was on her way home. But her mother called her back. This call at 4:22 goes to voicemail. The defendant misses the call. 2 minutes later at 4:24, the defendant calls her back and tells her that she should stop on her way home to pick up her glasses from the eye doctor. And since she's only 16, the defendant, who's out running errands, instead of picking them up herself, says she'll call the eye doctor and she'll give permission, since Jessica is underage, so that Jessica can pick the glasses up herself. And therefore, she delays Jessica by several minutes. And so we know, I'm sorry, I meant Isabella. Speaks to Isabella to delay her from coming home in order to give Baker time to complete the murder. So here the defendant is at 4:32. If you recall, just a few seconds before the still photo that you see here on the left, the defendant is headed toward the exit with the target bag in her left hand. And she is so concentrated on her phone in her right hand that she sort of veers off the path that would normally lead one out the door. And she has to look up and redirect herself in order to make it through the door, as was testified to by Detective Gable. And then at 4:38, you can see the Ford F-150 as she leaves the parking lot. And she knows at this point that this is the window during which Fabio should be murdered by Baker and Austin. And now she goes to Ralph's to continue her alibi. We know that she pulls into the parking lot, 4:41. She gets a shopping cart at 4:42. At 4:46, while she's inside of the Ralph's, she messages Baker via Viber to let him know what's going on in terms of the time frame, with Isabella going from Agora to Woodland Hills in order to pick up her glasses. And at 4:50, again, while she's inside of the Ralph's, she deletes, as you heard from Cy Ray, Lifestyle Lounge and several other things from her phone in anticipation of the fact that Fabio will be dead by the time she gets home, and there will be a law enforcement investigation after the fact. Yeah, you're right. The screen on the bottom right, instead of saying 5:52, it should say 4:52. It's 10 minutes off. That's a typo. So she's in the store for about 10 minutes. She goes in with a cart, but she comes out with a tiny little bag in her right hand. Remember, the story to law enforcement is that she went to Target. I believe she said she was going to buy some cards and some shaving cream. And then she goes to Ralph's because she needs to buy veal cutlets because she's making fatina for dinner. And so 10 minutes later, she leaves with the small bag in her right hand. She's got the phone you can see there as she's walking out on the left hand because she's watching for any communications between Baker or her daughters, so she can ensure that the timeline is still open. And she walks out with her purse or wristlet on her left wrist. We know that, as I described this to you yesterday, near Fabio's right hand, you can just make out a portion of the handset from the home phone on the chair as Fabio is slumped over the chair and dead after Baker and Austin are successful in accomplishing the object of the conspiracy. I talked this morning about the cleanup, and of course, when Delia is flown in and she testifies none of these items, such as this blue rag or the vinegar bottle that's normally kept under the sink, or any of the blood stains around the kitchen, are there at the time that she leaves, because obviously her job was to clean. And so by the time she leaves, the house is spotless. Here you can see the circuit breaker box, which I told you when you go out from the kitchen door to the left, right next to that cabinet is the breaker box with several of the levers. I think Detective Vernon said there were 7 that were flipped off. And here you get a much better picture of the top of that tall white cabinet where the DVR sat to the right. And now all you see are the cords that used to connect that through the back of the cabinet into the kitchen. And you can see here all of those cords are out of sight on top of the cabinet. There is no DVR. We know that at 4:53, Baker, who's wearing the green sweatshirt, as you can see from the inset photograph on the top left, is wearing that Sean John sweatshirt. He's the driver. We know this because, of course, Baker leaves his own blood in driver's compartment, right? On the steering wheel, on the door controls, on the seat controls. And then because he's just murdered Fabio and walked through Fabio's blood on the patio, he's tracked that. He's transferred that blood from the bottom of his shoes onto the clutch in the Porsche. Again, this is again why I told you, when you have a story that comes up only after arrest, after numerous opportunities to explain, during all of these law enforcement interviews, the defendant never mentions any kind of racquetball injury. And the story about there being a racquetball injury, and hence why Baker's blood is tracked into the house, again, doesn't explain how the blood then gets into Fabio's Porsche, right? Another reason why that story fails. So we know Baker's driving away. 4:53 is he's at the corner of Queen Victoria, taking a right onto Oakdale. And then here at 4:54, here we have Isabella coming home after picking up her eyeglasses, and we already know what she's going to find, right? She's turning from Oakdale, and she's going to turn left onto Queen Victoria. That's how tight, that's how narrow this timeline window is. And just as the defendant planned, and you heard from Detective Roberts that no matter what route she took home from the store, it never took her 11 minutes, okay? So we know what time the defendant leaves Ralph's. It always took Detective Roberts somewhere between 3 and 4 minutes. And she gave an extra minute just for good measure. And so what we know is, and what Detective Roberts testified to when she was asked, well, you don't believe that the defendant would intentionally delay her return to the home in order to allow her daughter to find her own father's body, do you? And she said, it's exactly what I believe she did. Because again, everything she's done so far is to try and separate or distance herself from the crime, and she doesn't want to be the one to find the body. That's why she's gone to these stores to set up this alibi. That's why she's deleted all of the messages and the searches from the January 22nd and the January 23rd, the mirror, all of these other things that she's done. She's meticulously gone back and destroyed, suppressed, concealed evidence, which goes to conscience of guilt. And so then we know at 5:14, this is the last contact between the defendant and her lover ever using Viber. At 5:14, he contacts the defendant via Viber, and after that, they both delete the application, the encrypted application, and the accompanying data. And as you heard, when you use the various software tools that allow you to extract information from a cell phone, as the software becomes more and more advanced, we are able to pick up, sometimes if we're lucky, more and more of the remnants or the artifacts of data that's been deleted. And so as a result, what you heard even from the defendant's own expert, that he would always recommend that you re-extract or redump devices, because you never know what you're going to find. And as you heard over the course of the several years that Detective Roberts handled this case, even though all of the devices in this case had been processed by LAPD in years past, she continually had every couple of years, because there's always updates coming out with the software, the devices re-extracted to see if more or additional information could be obtained from what had been deleted. So one more thing I did want to mention, when you think about the fact that Sheila Salehian told us that the defendant never brought up Fabio, not before the murder, not after. The defendant never brought up her children. Ron Ray, who meets the defendant after the murder, has no idea. He never knew that the defendant had been married. He had no idea that she was a widow. He had no idea that she had children until they were at a club up on a stage with a DJ, and the defendant made some comment about wanting to send a picture because her daughter is going to think she's such a cool mom, and that he was shocked by that because neither she nor Baker had ever mentioned that she had this family. And so if you think to yourselves, well, no mother is going to allow, their 16-year-old daughter to come home and find their father's dead body after he's just been murdered, because that would indicate that she cares very little about her daughter or her children or their mental well-being. Think back to the fact that Isabella and Jessica, for that matter, after the murder, are left alone night after night after night in this house where their father's been slaughtered, because she thought it was more important that she be able to go out and have fun with her lover to comedy clubs and bars and to try and pick up a bouncer, a stranger outside of a bar one night. That's how free she felt. So again, as Detective Roberts stated, that's exactly what the defendant did in this case. And you also heard the defendant's sister mention that after the murder, she came and stayed several times with the defendant and the girls, and that she was cooking, she was cleaning, she was doing laundry, and she also took Isabella to a therapy appointment one day. And remember, when Isabella got on the stand and we asked her about the therapy appointment, she indicated her mother went with her once. And also you saw a series of text messages, and we're going to show some of them today, not all of them again, but at some point she tells her mother, I'm going to make that therapy appointment tomorrow. So this is a young girl who will likely never be able to erase from her mind what you all saw in photographs, which is much different. I know it's hard to look at them, those photos, because they're so graphic. But think of her seeing it in person, not through a photograph. She's this young girl. She finds her father dead. Her mother doesn't come home for several more minutes. She's there alone. She doesn't know what she's looking at. You heard the 911 call. She's in a panic. She's trying to get him help. She doesn't realize he's dead. She doesn't realize he's been stabbed to death. Again, she's not able to process what it is that she's seeing. And, there's a reason we don't show family members photographs of their loved ones dead, because it's things that you can't get out of your brain. And unfortunately, that will be the same for you. And over time, perhaps they fade when you go on about your lives, but they're also...
Yes.
And so, as I said, you heard the 911 call where Isabella is trying to get help and is unable to move her father's body. And then several minutes later, her mother comes home. We know that 45 minutes after they flee, Austin gets ticketed driving the rental vehicle near Baker's apartment, as you heard from Ray. Baker then decides that Austin needs to leave town sooner than expected, because recall, he was due to go back the following day on February 24th. Baker then takes Austin to the flyaway so that he can catch the shuttle back to home, take the shuttle to LAX, and Austin pays a fee to change his ticket at the counter. Before Baker drops him off, Baker hands him the gold coins that the defendant had removed from the safe earlier that day, and subsequently the defendant reports those stolen. So let's talk about some of the statements the defendant makes to law enforcement after the murder. She is asked by Detectives Parshall and Verna whether her husband had life insurance, and she says she doesn't know. She only thinks he had one policy, and that was a policy for Luigi, Fabio's son, in Toronto, in Canada. They ask her to go through the events of what she did and who she met with on the day of the murder, because, again, this crime scene looks very targeted, very suspicious, and they're wondering if something or someone that she came in contact with somehow followed or came to her home. And so she makes no mention of meeting with Robert Baker at all. She also, as I said earlier, makes no mention of any racquetball injury. She also says she has no knowledge of the surveillance camera system, and all of this is recorded. And if you don't remember it, you can read through the transcripts, but listening to her voice and her demeanor as she tries to distance herself and make light of and downplay and minimize is also very important. Again, another key reason why it's important to record your conversations with witnesses and potential defendants. So there is a record going forward, not just of what was said. So someone can't get up like Miss Obad on the stand and say, well, I didn't say that. Well, there's a transcript, there's a tape, so that someone can't say that they didn't say, or that they did say something that the recording shows different. So you have that in this case. She also mentions very specifically that she had no remote access on her phone to view the surveillance cameras at her house. She tells the detectives, as I mentioned earlier, that the safe is hidden behind a mirror in her walk-in closet, which is also hidden behind a door. She tells them, as I mentioned earlier, that Fabio kept his gun, some gold coins, and some gold in the safe. So again, not items you would expect Fabio to be removing from the safe during that day as he's working from home. He's not playing with his gun. He's not looking at his gold coins. He's not looking at gold. Those are exhibits 23 and 24. Also, all three co-conspirators very shortly begin using the same encrypted app, WhatsApp. And you heard that both Baker and Anna tried to claim that the defendant was using WhatsApp at some time prior to the murder. However, again, you heard from two different experts in this case, investigator Jake Gibson, who used to be a DA investigator, as well as Officer Curtis Davis, who looked at the extractions from the defendant's cell phone, and they found that the defendant didn't register to use WhatsApp until after the murder. After she deleted Viber, a couple days later, she switches to using WhatsApp. And it's pretty significant that, again, all three co-conspirators are acting together, doing the same thing during the same time period. Not coincidental that all three of them are registering and beginning to use WhatsApp. And again, as I also mentioned, while they could argue that they used Viber, an encrypted app, prior to the murder because they're hovering up an affair, now there's no husband. What's the reason why you're trying to cover up your communications? Who's going to be looking at your phone, right? So what is it they're trying to hide? And then, as you recall, after the murder, the defendant starts doing these public posts on her Instagram account in order to engender sympathy. And she sets up the shrine on Fabio's favorite chair on the patio, same location where he was murdered 2 days prior. And of course, this sort of takes on a much more sinister appearance when you look at it now in hindsight, after coming through a couple of months of this trial and learning all of the machinations and the things the defendant did, in this case, to have her husband murdered. And now she's posting pictures of the place where he's killed online. So it takes on, again, a very different perspective. And also, if you recall that, again, Morella Sementilli, Fabio's older sister, who taught him everything he knew about the business and worked together with him for years in various salons before he moved his family to California, when she comes into town with their mother and sister and the kids and their spouses on the 25th, they ask the defendant about what happened on the day of the murder. And the story the defendant gives them is radically different from the one she tells law enforcement, which isn't surprising because we heard that she does this all the time. She lies and she changes up the story, as Deborah Obad called it, shady behavior. And she claimed that she took Fabio to a colonoscopy appointment that morning, which we know was false because we saw what happened on the surveillance video and the cell records of where she went and what she did. That she and Fabio ran some errands. I think instead of saying a power washer at this point, she said it was a weed whacker because it was a lie. And she said they went out, they had a great lunch. They spent a beautiful day together, she said. And then she dropped Fabio off, remember, at home because she was going out to Ralph's to pick up the ingredients she needed for the dinner, the fatina she was planning on cooking that night. And this is when, of course, she also tells them that the safe had been broken open by the robbers and the lock was broken. And I talked to you earlier about the alert that came at 2:03 and the mobility records and what happened during that week when the family saw the surveillance video and the defendant came home and became very angry that they had watched that without her. And then you heard that in the weeks following the murder and the months, the defendant was constantly complaining about the fact that she and her daughters didn't have enough money. And there's a text string between the defendant and Morella. It's Exhibit 610, where the defendant even talks about the estate attorney and hiring an estate attorney to try and acquire money from Fabio's estate. And Morella becomes so concerned for her sister-in-law because they had been like sisters all these years, and her nieces, that she asks her partner Marco to help her. And so then you heard the defense try to portray the defendant as the victim, when in fact what the evidence showed is that she lied, cheated, manipulated, and fooled so many people who cared about her, who loved her. But suddenly, all of the people who tried to help her are the ones at fault here, who shouldn't be believed. And so you also heard what happened, that in their tradition, they have what's called a 30-day anniversary after 30 days after the death. And there are church services and memorials and things of that nature. And after the fact, Morella and Marco had a lot of the people that came to the services back to their house up in Canada, and the defendant came. Sam Pulera was there, and they were in the garage that night smoking because it was raining outside. And so the defendant then proceeded to tell all of them that she wanted to be left alone. She was tired of everybody calling. She was tired of them coming down and staying with her. She wanted to be left alone to do what she wanted to do because she wanted to be free, and that Fabio would want her to move on. And remember, this is 30 days after his death. So we're talking about an almost 20-year marriage. And then the words that if she wanted to fuck somebody, she's going to fuck somebody. Now, when we talk about the local funeral service in the Valley on January 29th, that following Sunday, and then the wake at the Sementilli home, we know that Robert Baker, who was the only one that wasn't connected to Fabio at this location, was there at the invitation, obviously, of the defendant. Because remember, this is a memorial for the people that want to get together and grieve and celebrate his life and share stories about him and memories. So ask yourselves, if she wasn't involved in a murder conspiracy, who invites their lover to their husband's wake?
So a rule is an inference that counsel can make an argument.
And this is the one piece of evidence on top of all of the others that I've talked to you about over the last couple of days that shows how arrogant these two individuals are, because obviously they didn't think they were going to get caught. And he stood out because he was the one person there, as you heard, that didn't belong. And so the people from Wella, family members, were wondering, who is this character who sticks out? And we also know that earlier that day, while the family and friends are at the funeral service in the Valley on January 29th, that Sunday, Baker, recall, on that same day drives up to Victorville because you have those records from the burner phones that he purchased, recall? And I think they were under the name Daniel something or other. We're going to see it in a sec. And he purchases some burner phones. And remember, he has to get her the burner phone before she leaves, because she's leaving for Canada 2 days later on January 31st, because Wella is repatriating Fabio's body. They're sending his body back to his home country for what they thought at that time was going to be a burial. And so he needs to get her the burner phone so that they can continue communicating. And so he obviously did so that night. Another thing that I wanted to point out, I also mentioned a few moments ago that the posting of Fabio's favorite chair in the shrine that the defendant set up with the cigar that, if you recall, Dave Diaz said he had just brought over to Fabio a couple days before, and some of Fabio's favorite things, and took on a sinister quality when you look at it in hindsight. But also notice where the defendant and Robert Baker are sitting around this fire pit, the same area where Fabio was found slaughtered the week prior by Baker with the assistance of the defendant. And there were numerous people who said they felt very uncomfortable when they went over to the Sementilli home to pay condolence calls during that week, because the defendant was going out to that location and showing people this is where he was killed. And everybody felt very uncomfortable because what they knew had happened there. So here are those T-Mobile records. Daniel Jones, you can see from T-Mobile with the same address. That's a fake address for these burner phones. And then, of course, when the defendant goes to Canada, we know she takes the ZTE burner phone with her because, of course, it says on January 31st, welcome to Canada. And so then again, this is February 8th, and February 8th of 1997 was the 20th anniversary of Fabio and the defendant, and she makes this post, and she tells her sister Anna that she wants to go home. She wants to go back to California because she wants to be alone with the girls so the three of them can grieve together. And instead, what we learned was on that night, as soon as she gets back home, she leaves the girls and she goes out with Baker that night until the early morning hours of the next day. And as I talked about earlier, where I told you that the defendant has a history of using people to do her dirty work, we know that Anna comes into town after the funeral services in Toronto to stay with the defendant, but she leaves town on February 19th. And that same night, the defendant is using her daughter, Jessica, in case anybody calls or texts. Don't say you even have a friend over. Don't answer. Just say you're home, or Selena or something. It's nobody's business. And again, defendant's out with Baker that night and doesn't get home until 2:20 in the morning. Now, Anna also told you that she was aware that during this time period, State Farm paid money to replace that DVR system. And as she said, to do stuff around the house, which Anna told you she thought was excessive. And so the defendant took that money and she repainted, she got new carpet, she bought new drapes. But again, you'd think that a mother who cared an ounce about having security and making sure her kids are safe, the location where her husband's been murdered, when she's going to be leaving them alone, the first priority would be to replace the security system or buy some kind of a more significant security system, but she never does that. And Again, on February 19th, she's asking her daughter to lie for her. And we know that she's out with Baker until the early morning hours of the following day on the 20th. Now, on that same day, on February 20th, she has a recorded call with Detective Parshall, which we played for you, where again, he asks what she did on the 23rd to go back over the details. And again, she mentions going to the gym, but she never mentions Baker. She doesn't mention any type of an accident. And she again mentions going shopping, but fails again to mention that she met up with Baker at the Target. This is exhibits 39 and 40, the recording and the transcript. And then we heard that on February 21st, Detectives Parshall and Verna come to the Queen Victoria home in order to sit down and have a more lengthy interview with the defendant since the night of the murder. And you heard the recording of that particular
Ada,
interview. And this is the same day, February 21st, but the
mentioned a
beginning,
lot of stuff.
the defendant mentioned that
I'm what?
I said the
family
defendant
in at that time that was
mentioned a
staying with
lot of
her.
stuff.
We know that's the same day that Jessica is interviewed, Ernie
All right, you're
Valderrano,
competing.
Fabio's friend,
You
is
stop her. What?
The defendant forgot to mention a lot of stuff.
All right, guys, wake up.
I got to take a break. I have been solid interpreting from 7:30 this morning.
All right, my love. Wake up. We got to
there
get
that
through this,
day.
guys.
He's interviewed, and again, the defendant lies to them. She tells them she didn't have remote access to the home surveillance cameras. In fact, she goes further, doubles down now, says she doesn't have any contact information for the installation company. Remember that whole email chain with Sean Conn? She tells law enforcement that the reason she might not have any of that information is because Fabio carried a lot of cash in his pockets and he probably paid them in cash, so there might not be any paper trail. So there's no way for her to find the name of the company. She never mentioned that she was in communication with Baker that entire day. She never mentioned again seeing Baker twice that day. And then she comes up with this news story that she tries to float that maybe when they ask her, has anybody had any accidents? Is there any reason why there should be blood in your house? Because remember, this is February 21st. And what you learned was that on the 14th of February, detectives received the preliminary results from the crime scene in the Porsche with blood samples that match up to Baker. And so they ask, is there any reason why anybody else's blood should be in this house? And she says, they don't tell her about the DNA results, but she says, well, Fabio might have cut himself trying to fix a power washer. And once again, doesn't mention any racquetball injury, which obviously would have been relevant to this particular area of conversation. She mentions that gold coins are missing, which we know have been kept in the safe. And she downplays her relationship with Baker to the extent that she even pretends not to know his last name. Remember, she says, Robert, he's the racquetball coach. I think his name might be Baker. And she also tells the detectives that Baker had never been home to the home prior to the murder. Now, on that same day, as I said, February 21st, when they interview people separately, law enforcement does. And Jessica brings up when they ask, is there anything odd that's ever happened? Has anybody, ever been to the home or stayed at the home? And she brings up the time when she found Baker sleeping in her mother's bed while her father is out of town. And so they go back to the defendant and they say, well, who's this? They don't rat out Jessica, but they say, well, who's this guy Baker? And that's when she says, oh, he's just the racquetball coach. And Jessica tells the detectives that the night that Baker slept over, her mother came home at 2:30 in the morning. And she also tells them she never told her father about it because her mother told her not to say anything to him. So again, another example of the defendant getting, teaching, coaching her daughters to lie for her, grooming them. And at this point in time, going backwards, she basically is using the daughters to keep information from their father. And this is also when, if you recall, Ernie Valorano's testimony, when he came in to testify at trial and talked about this, that he said that when the detective spoke to him that day and they asked him if he was had any information, if either Fabio or the defendant maybe ever had an affair, he was offended by it. And he was appalled that law enforcement would even be asking him these questions about his close friends. And then he relates to them the story about how the year prior, he and Fabio traveled to Thailand for a golf trip, and that they would have dinner every night after they golfed. And then Fabio would rush back to his room because he wanted to FaceTime, and accounting for the time difference, he wanted to be able to reach his wife and his girls, like you saw in the OPI post, his beloved girls, so that he could speak to them every single night. And so Ernie testified that he never even suspected or thought for a moment that either Fabio or the defendant would have ever had an affair. And so, again, as I said, a lot of these people, once they learn several months after that the defendant's arrested with her lover for Fabio's murder, you can imagine that one would be quite angry and feel extremely betrayed, especially given all of the things these very good, decent people did for her and her daughters. So later that same night, after she has this interview with law enforcement, the defendant on February 21st is out again with Baker until about 1 a.m. You heard about all of this and the photographs, and contrary to the defense spin story that Baker was the one that was in charge, it's fairly clear that the defendant's actions show.
So should I contact Las Vegas and see if we can start making bets? Figure out what the odds are?
She's the one. She's the one who calls the
I'll bet.
shots. And one of those examples
You probably
was
win.
when they're out and the defendant comes out from a bar that they're in, and she initiates an encounter with a bouncer out front of the location where surveillance officers are watching this go down.
At least you did not have to interpret the detailed pictures of her private anatomy that she described.
I'm very glad about that. That makes me very happy.
Baker's inside
Angela Lansbury on that one.
the bar, but if you recall, they observe her. She sits down next to a bouncer on a bench, the bench out front. She starts touching the bouncer on his inner thigh area. She puts her hand behind his neck.
Oh, never mind.
And then kisses him on the lips, and then goes back to the bar, and later comes out later with Baker. Appears they have some sort of an argument. He walks away from her in the parking lot, and the defendant becomes very upset and starts crying, and certainly appears to shed more tears and be more upset over the argument she has with Baker that night than she ever did when it came to her husband's murder. Ooh. So the following night, on February 22nd, we learn that the Gangs and Narcotics Division, who's tasked with doing the surveillance at this point in time in February, follows the defendant and Baker, and the detectives, Verna and Parshall, are trying to figure out where Baker's staying because they know he's not going back to his house. And so they follow him back to Roger Brown's apartment in Glendale that night. And so You heard from Roger Brown, who's been friends with the defendant since 1997. Over the years, since Baker's been arrested, he's made numerous jail visits to meet with him. Baker calls him regularly from jail, and he testified actually twice that he used to play basketball, I think, with Baker and some other individuals, including this attorney, Howard Lynch. And if you recall, Howard Lynch, his name came up once again once the defendant and Baker were arrested, because they're using his law office to call through to make clean calls initially so they can leave messages with him and his staff. And then once Howard Lynch decides this is probably not a real good idea and he could get into trouble, he has a conversation with Baker, and they switch to using April, if you recall, to call through. And so we also heard Roger Brown say that the defendant, who he was introduced to by Baker as Madonna, came to his apartment numerous times while Baker was staying there after the murder, because obviously Baker's on the lam. He's gone from Lashane Holmes to Al Birdsong's in Vegas to Sheila and Ricardo's, and now he's staying with Roger Brown in mid-February. And Roger Brown at some point takes Baker over to the Starbucks to meet up with the defendant, again, who he knows as Madonna, and he testifies that he had actually met Madonna and Baker the year before when Baker brought her to Roger Brown's birthday party. And so he testifies to some of that, but again, he tries to indicate he doesn't think Madonna ever slept over, but he was in another room and he didn't pay attention and things of that nature to try and distance himself. And we also know that the night before his arrest on June 13th, that's the day, remember, when the defendant is returning from Toronto after the Mirror Awards, and she flies home in Baker's army shirt and takes photos. Baker comes over to Roger Brown's apartment and gives him a new phone number. And that number, if you recall, again, connecting up little pieces of information, turned out to be the burner phone number for one of the phones that Baker purchased.
Okay, guys. I hate to do this to you. Okay, everybody get their squishy ball. Everybody get your squishy ball. You're going to need it. Look at her binder. She's just barely halfway through it. Look at right there. They're the clips. See how full it is on that side? See how thick it is on that side? I think she's going to go until tomorrow.
Bruh.
No. No.
Got to do it.
In Victorville on the date of January 29th, before going to the wake where he gives the defendant the one he bought for her. And so on the 25th,
Monday.
again,
We're going to Monday.
the defendant is out with Baker. This
Unless
time
the judge brings the jury in on the weekend, but they're not being sequestered.
3:15 in the morning. We heard from the surveillance
Won't go like
crew,
this.
G&D. They follow the defendant and Baker, and the defendant picks Baker up again from Roger Brown's. They go out. They arrive back at the apartment at 12:45 in the morning, where the defendant
They have a different court reporter. It's not the same person.
then stays until 3:14 the next day, which is now February 26th, before she goes home. We know that on February 26th, she flies to Toronto for Fabio's 1-month memorial of his death, just to give you the timeline of the pieces.
No, here's the
And
better
then-
look how thick. She's still got at least that much more to go. Where my finger's going through. She's just barely halfway through the freaking binder. Gotta hope she's coming to an end. Please, Lord. Please, Lord.
And March 4th, after the defendant returns to the Los Angeles area after the
Judge
1 month
even awake. What?
Until Monday at 9 a.m. Again.
the recording of that particular. And she also tells the detectives that Baker had never been home to the home prior to the murder. Now, on that same day, as I said, February 21st, the gangs and narcotics girls, so significant security system, but she never does that, accounting for to Roger Brown's apartment in Glendale that night. And so you heard from Roger Brown, who's been friends with the defendant since 1997.
I can't remember, were we there?
From jail, and he Baskin's attorney came up once again.
There it is.
Some point as Madonna, and he testified when Baker brought her
just
to
over it.
Roger Brown's birthday party.
I'm
And
over
so he testifies to some of that, but again, he tries to indicate he doesn't think Madonna ever slept over, but he was in another room and he didn't pay attention and things of that nature to try and distance
drop
himself.
this trial like a
And
freaking
we
hot one.
also know that the night before his arrest on June 13th, that's the day, remember, when the defendant is returning from Toronto after the Mirror Awards, and she flies home in Baker's army shirt and takes photos. Baker comes over to Roger Brown's apartment and gives him a new phone number. And that number, if you recall, again, connecting up little pieces of information, turned out to be the burner phone number for one of the phones that Baker purchased in Victorville
Standard print.
on the date of January 29th before going to the wake, where he gives the defendant the one he bought for her. And so on the 25th, again, the defendant is out with Baker, this time till 3:15 in the morning. We heard from the surveillance crew, G&D. They follow the defendant and Baker, and the defendant picks Baker up again from Roger Brown's. They go out. They arrive back at the apartment at 12:45 in the morning, where the defendant then stays until 3:14 the next day, which is now February 26th, before she goes home. We know that on February 26th, she flies to Toronto for Fabio's 1 month memorial of his death, just to give you the timeline of the pieces. And then March 4th, after the defendant returns to the Los Angeles area after the 1 month memorial in Toronto, where she returned on March 3rd, she immediately resumes the same pattern where she's going out with Baker. On this date, March 3rd, she and Baker stay at a hotel until 6:18 in the morning the next day. And we heard about that during the cross-examination of the defendant's sister, Anna. Now, you also heard that the defendant made a series of calls to Detective Barshal. And once again, Detective Barshal and Detective Verna recorded, if at all possible, every time she would call. And you heard a set of those recordings along with a transcript. And during this phone call on March 8th, the defendant is asking Detective Barshal about whether or not there's been any DNA results. And of course, Barshal isn't going to share his investigative information. She again reiterates now for the third time, fourth time, she doesn't know the make or model of this DVR system. She can't locate any documents relating to the system. And she says, again, she puts it on Fabio that he's the one that purchased and replaced the system with the installers, but she has not replaced the security system. And Barshal is repeatedly asking her this question every time he speaks to her, because the defendant claims she still is waiting for the insurance money. And we heard that wasn't true. from the defendant's sister, Anna, who said the amount of money that they sent her was excessive. And so the defendant was redoing the house. Sure.
All right, we will adjourn until Monday at 9 a.m. Again, the admonition applies not to discuss this case among yourselves with anyone else or form expressing opinions on the cause is finally submitted to you. Today is just a regular Friday, but tomorrow, unfortunately, is Chores Saturday. I'm not looking forward to it, but I don't want to do it alone. So join me.
Seriously? Gil. Hey, Diane.
Hi, love. Oh, my. That woman just likes to hear herself talk.
Is she going to go over into the 12-hour closing?
Highly possible.
4 more hours.
I really don't know what she's going to do. I think she's crazy myself. Or she's bound and determined she's going to win this trial. You know? Yeah.
This
Well-
is my brain right now. If you can't hear the crickets,
I can hear them.
that is exactly where I'm at right now.
Oh, man, I'll tell you. Oh,
All right, let's do the drawing.
draw, honey. Draw.
I guess you may have to. Well, you won. So you got an entry, love. Congratulations. Yay.
Yay for her. One of these days, I'm going to get an entry.
Well, you got to put the word I liked in.
Oh.
Hey, June. So, okay.
Oh,
Congratulations, y'all are been entered into the drawing. BL Blazy has received her gift card. She chose
Yay.
Amazon. I will
That's
try my best this weekend to get the marches done, and then on Monday we'll do the March drawing. Just been a little crazy with Sensei's passing for me to get everything done, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but
it is just life, honey. It's the way it goes.
they did her paw print.
I want to see.
Someone spelt her name wrong.
Oh, look at that. Sensai. How do you spell her name?
Sensei.
Oh, wow.
And it looks like they trimmed her toenails. She needed them. And when this lady did this wood burning of her.
Oh, look at that. That's just beautiful. It could be moose. It could be my moose. It's just absolutely lovely. You will always treasure that. You know?
Or she's right there in that box.
I have a little pin for moose that they gave me.
Well, I have a necklace that I can put some of her ashes in.
Yeah.
So, and I have her nose and paw print that they did when I took her to the vet. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys for being loving and understanding. I am going to take a minute to lay down, get off my back for a few minutes. I'm going to get me some drink and food, and I'm going to come back at 6 o'clock, I think is where I have my other thing set at. I think I set it at 6.
Margie's already asked me what's for dinner, and I'm like, I don't have a clue. I don't. Maybe somebody in airmail fly over and drop something. You know?
And the
Oh,
crystal stone, did they make the stone out of their ashes? I looked at you can get a diamond made, but a fourth of a carat was like 3 grand. I'm like,
yes, like I love you, Sensei. Maybe I'll hang on to your ashes until my ship comes in. Then I'll have it done. That would be lovely.
"Omelet, chips, and beans." Okay, that works.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm probably just gonna go have a little bit of cheese and peanut butter. I don't eat much at one time, and that's one thing I need to explain. I had a pyloric sphincter repair, and then they did the sleeve, and so I can't eat a whole lot at one time, and so if I munch through the day, and if someone got a little upset about me eating while I'm live, and guys, I have to. And you can ask Miss Dan, I have to eat about every hour, eat a little something, or I get sick.
Yeah, yeah, really. And I do understand that. The thing I have found, you see this lovely little cup? It holds bone broth. Doctor, what's her name? I forget. And it is lovely. Bone broth is lovely.
Well, I used to drink broth, but it's so salty now.
This is it. This is it. This is lovely. I will,
Send it to me.
yeah, I'll send you her name. She's been on Good Morning America and various programs, and I will tend to drink maybe 2 of these in the morning, and then sometimes I'll do
Oh,
one at night before bed.
thank you, babe. Thank you, honey.
So anyway, I really, really, and they have different flavors, but I just simply tend to like the straight bone broth. Margie goes, it don't taste like nothing. I go, well, you know what? I tend to like it just like that. I don't go for a lot of flavors because then it has so much salt in it and so much stuff in it. And it's like,
Exactly.
and I don't need that.
Okay, Diane, you don't have to join us, but we'll be back at 6 o'clock. That's 7 o'clock your time. You need to go to bed. You've been live all day.
I will probably, I have to be on the road in the morning to go pick up a couple of things. I did get my light over my stove and my new faucet in my kitchen. I found a fellow doing some work for me fairly cheaply, but it's good work.
Who used a monkey, Haley?
Who used a monkey? Who used a monkey, Haley? I don't.
Anonymous with donations to Lynn. Amber Heard. That's what that reference, I believe, is into.
know.
Okay, guys. I
All
love
right,
you.
darlings. I love you.
Listening, and we will see y'all in an hour. And I appreciate it. We will do day 5 of the Sturmer trial. Okay. Have a great night. See you in an hour. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. I hope you have an awesome day. Till next time, take care.